As many of you now know, this channel is now sponsored, and this episode specifically is now sponsored by the Esoteric Academy. The Esoteric Academy is an online virtual mystery school that has been created by my friend Paula and myself. On this mystery school, we have all sorts of online courses, including courses over the Bhagavad Gita, the alchemy of movement, polishing the mirror, which is one of Ram Dass's books and teachings, and meditation. We also have forbidden interviews with very potent guests and a couple of libraries based off of exercise, which you're seeing on the screen before you. Some snippets of those exercises. As many of you know, exercise is the foundation of spirituality. And so I have meticulously designed many classes to do at home that helps you trigger and activate your chakras and get your mind ready to embrace a spiritual practice. Right now, during our soft launch phase, we are offering tuition at only $25 a month, which is a steal. That's literally the price of a drop-in yoga class. This course, this virtual website literally has thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of courses, and you can get it for only $25 a month. And if you purchase now within our soft launch, you will be stuck at $25 a month. Your tuition will never raise. On February 20th of 2025, our tuition goes up to $40 a month. We are looking at scheduling our first live call with our students on February 1 at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's February 1 of 2025, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for all of our students on the Esoteric Academy. I believe we have about 60 people so far. We will be doing monthly live calls, one live call a month. That's just to sit down and chit chat about certain topics. We will also be offering live classes soon. And as many of you know, these courses are going to continue to be, new courses are going to continue to be added to the library. The old courses are not going anywhere. So your access to all this information will only increase. We've got courses coming up from Cindy at Sacred Garden Yoga, as well as courses coming from Catherine Edwards and Todd, my boyfriend Todd, coming very, very soon. If you would like to try the Esoteric Academy, there is a link down in the description box below. Please know that you get the first 7 days free, a free trial for the first 7 days. So if you want to try it for the first 7 days and you don't like it, you can always cancel. Thank you so much, guys, and I hope you enjoy the episode ahead. Oh, my hair looks a mess. That's okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Esoteric Atlanta. It is like 4:30 in the morning. I was just telling Paula, like, oh, my hair looks a mess, but you know, it's 4:30 in the morning, which is 5:30 p.m. for you. How are you, little time traveler? How does Tuesday work out for us?
How's the future going so far?
Is Tuesday
over here? It is still so hot. We've still got so many hot days, so we're just sitting at home with the fan going and just trying to keep cool in another heat wave that we got going on.
West, we're getting pummeled. As like we're getting pummeled by snow, which we never get. I mean, Florida got it's wild to see the videos from Florida. They got like 9 inches of snow, you know, which is a little less than a foot, and to see the snow on the banks of the ocean.
Yep.
Is wild. It's wild. So I mean, welcome to the age of Aquarius, right? And I've talked about that before. The Cassiopeans had said that not all the weather anomalies that are coming towards us for us are nefarious. Some of them are just the result of the veil thinning. And I definitely think that that's what's happened in the Southeast, because we don't get this weather, and it's because it's not really hurting people. It's just kind of here and kind of coming into. I think it's just the barometric pressure. If there's a veil, and it's lifting, then it's going to change the pressure. And so I think that's what is causing the weather to act funny.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not a science person, so I could talk about philosophy all day and literature all day. When it comes to math and science, that's not my thing. But that kind of makes sense to me, that really things are shifting, and it's just kind of, you know, and we're having fun. I know y'all aren't having that because heat waves are brutal. So
yeah.
So
if you got a pool, you're okay. But yeah, no, we're just hiding in the aircon mainly.
It's I think about our ancestors collectively. For those of us who live in like warmer climates, like where you live, where I live, And I think about the times where there was no air conditioning.
And
And
what about the clothes that they wore?
I know, isn't
They
that
had corsets and they had layers of like petticoats and dresses and skirts. And I'm like, how did they do it in this
how do
heat?
they do it? I know in Charleston, where my mom is from, the old antebellum houses in Charleston, they're
Mhm.
famous because the side of the house is actually the front of the house, and it was to catch the wind. So they're like, they look really narrow, but it's a thing in Charleston.
Oh,
But if you go into those old antebellum houses, like you'll have a flight of stairs. And of course, back then houses were built magnificently, not like they are now, where
yeah.
they're put up really quickly. So these houses have lasted. But you go up the stairs, and on the overlook, the banister, they would have this area carved out for like a lounge chair so the ladies could sit and catch their breath in the
Oh,
heat after going up the stairs. So it
oh,
literally was a thing,
wow.
like because they were so hot, and it was they had, yeah, those corsets. And I'm like, I always think about my ancestors. I'm like, why didn't you guys go north in that heat?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for us, and we have air conditioning. And
Yeah, and we get to wear like less restrictive clothing these days.
I'm
We
like,
just
you
wear like
guys,
a thin summer dress.
y'all must
Yeah,
have
it's
really liked it
crazy.
down in the heat, because this is some bullshit.
Yeah.
So, but who knows? Yeah, I always say that with the history. Like, you mean to tell me
Well, yeah.
people in petticoats and stockings
Hmm.
transversed Appalachia?
Yeah, I know. There's definitely a lot. There's a lot of missing, I think, from what we've been told.
Question mark. Big old question
Yeah.
mark. So, I mean, we hike Appalachia on paved trails in modern clothes and struggle. So I don't, but anyway, you guys, I just, I hope wherever you are. And I think too, with the Cassiopeians, of course, we always want to take everything with a grain of salt. But when things start happening, it's kind of nice to have their perspective, because it's not always bad.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
we rush to
Well,
that
I mean,
conclusion.
a lot of spiritual kind of books that I've read have also said that, it's Mother Earth's way of kind of just cleaning up
Yeah.
things, for having a lot of flooding and kind of even fires and stuff, which aren't always very pleasant, but they are just kind of cleaning things up. It's just her way of trying to, yeah, just get things moving and change things up, because we can't just keep going the way we're going. It's not sustainable the way we're living. Definitely not.
Well, that's our own bodies too, the macro and the micro. Like, that's one thing I know we're going to kind of talk about more about traditional stuff, and all, but with sickness, like a fever your
Yeah.
body creating a small fire to burn off germs, or it's necessary when you have that fever for karma to be burned. And that's what happens in Mother Nature. I'm not saying what's happening in LA is that. We know that's not what's happening in LA. We
No.
know that that is actually, but in some cases, when there are like natural forest fires, it's mother nature's way of cleansing an area, burning some karma. And fortunately for the wild animals in those situations, usually they have an instinctual knowing before it happens, so that they can move
That's
out.
right.
you know
Mhm.
um, so it's fairer when it's natural. There's more of a balance, and it's fairer, than when it's not natural. So anyway, but speaking of that, you guys, I was telling Paula, um, I'm actually quite proud of him, because my boyfriend is a pretty private person, and I've wanted him to speak more because he's so intelligent. And not just with like yoga stuff, but just even with like the Great Awakening, like his perception, because he's been awake since 2001. So he's gone through a lot of like junk conspiracy himself. And so he's very grounded when it comes to things happening, which for
Mhm.
those of us who are newer to this, we're more emotional about it. And I was happy that he agreed to be interviewed for the Esoteric Academy to talk about his journey. And of course, he's going to be offering some Vedic courses and all this kind of stuff, japa meditation. But I was editing part two, because for you guys, I'm not in those interviews. That's for ethical purposes. Paula's conducting those interviews, because I think you guys get it. Like, it's just not ethical if your partner does that. So, and I was editing part two, where he got more into like his experience being a traditional yoga teacher, and his issues and the things he kind of pushed up against with more contemporary yoga. And I was telling you, Paul, I mean, there's a lot he left out, but it's like a 90-minute interview anyway. I got kind of emotional when I was editing it. Maybe it's because I know what he's been through, but I thought it would be kind of, before we play before we play the advertisement for you guys, like a little glimpse of the episode, I thought, I want to ask Paula some of these questions because for me, Paula, I've been in this world of traditional yoga now for so long that sometimes I forget what it's like for people who have only been exposed to contemporary yoga. Like I forget, like it's like I have to be reminded, like we have it on the academy, the Esoteric Academy, we have a course called the Academics of Spirituality where I just explain different terms. And that is because I forget that some people might not know what prana is or might not know what Shakti is. And so I have a section for people to know what those are. And he even talked about parampara or parampara, as I say, and we have that on what that is. And so I kind of want to just kind of start, like, what was your impression, Paula, of someone who's never been to India, of hearing his story versus what we see in like the corner yoga, the yoga studios you see everywhere now? What was your impression of what did you get from that? Like what?
I was extremely impressed. I mean, I think his level of commitment was really amazing. And like he was explaining how difficult it was for people, like a lot of people didn't stay very long. Some people didn't even stay for a few days because it's just so intense. I don't know if I could personally do it and handle it. I'm a bit of a wuss. Like, it sounds when he was telling me about it, it kind of just made me think of like the military. I was like, oh my God, it must be like joining the military and you were just being pushed to the absolute limit. And I can also understand like how the people that do hang in there and stay, how much of a tight bond you would form with those people, because it's so intense and you're pushing yourself to limits that you've never gone to before. It's bringing up emotions, it's bringing up shadow work, it's bringing up all kinds of stuff. And you guys are all working through it together on your own, but together in a small kind of little community. I just think it's amazing. And I just can't believe that, like, he read about it and then he was just like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And he saved up until he had enough money. And then he just went over there and he'd never even experienced it before. He didn't even know, apart from what he read in a book, he didn't even know what an actual Ashtanga yoga class was going to be like. And I mean, it's quite lucky that he had the strength to stay, because just imagine if he'd saved for, because it was like a whole year that I think it was or more of him saving up enough money to go over there. And he had no idea where he's going, what he's doing. He just kind of had this like newspaper article and kind of like an address written down and stuff. And I just think his courage. And back then there was no phones, there's no Google Maps. It's got a complete different country speaking another language. Like, his bravery is incredible.
He's so young, and that's how he is. Like, when he gets his mind to do something, he does it. But I will say you can handle it, Paula. I think you could, because you don't have ego. You're very humble, and that's the people who make it, who can survive, are the ones who are humble.
Okay.
And they accept the teachings. The ones that freak out are the ones that already have this like preconceived mythology around themselves. And when they get there and they're pushed to their limits, ego starts to crack. They're the ones that run. So I think you could actually handle it.
Oh, that's interesting, because I guess I was thinking it more from the physical perspective. I didn't really think about it from the mental perspective. And I am the kind of person that'll be the first to kind of criticize myself. Like,
but it's like that. It's being able to be taught. He brought that up in the episode. Like, a lot of people are actually not able. They don't know how to be taught, right? Yeah. To being open to learning, to actually going to someone and saying, teach me, I want to be your student. A lot of people, especially in the Western, don't even know what that really means,
No. And I've always been very, very open-minded. My kinesiologist always say to me that I'm the kind of person who's just always, if something goes wrong, I'm kind of first to blame myself and kind of be like, what have I done to kind of cause this situation, or what can I do to fix it, and kind of thing. But I think it's important, like maybe I could be a little bit extreme sometimes, but I do think you're right. It's important to kind of not have a huge ego about things, because like even, you know, I've created some courses for our academy and I've learned a lot of stuff, and maybe compared to some people, I might seem like I'm really, really knowledgeable. To other people, I might not seem so knowledgeable because they might know a lot more than me. But the thing is, I'm always willing to learn more. In fact, you know, I'm excited to learn more. I just love learning more stuff all the time. And I think if you're open to that, you can receive anything. You can receive the most amazing, life-changing knowledge. Whereas if you think you go into something thinking that you already know everything, you're not going to be open to receiving, and you could miss some beautiful opportunities, beautiful lessons. So I really have a lot of respect for Todd, to be honest. I really do. It was so nice to chat to him. He's really lovely and he's friendly and just really easy to talk to. I could probably listen to him for like, you know, hours and hours more because his life's so interesting. It's
I know.
fascinating.
I was telling him when I was editing the first interview you did and then the second one, I was like, you need to write a book because you actually have having more experiences than like Ram Dass, from what we read from Ram Dass's work, of these stories to tell. And I want him to do maybe he'll come join a live call with us where he'll tell some funny India. I have funny India. There's always stories to tell from India. But with him, with Patabi Joyce, because when he was going, when he started, it was the Ashtanga Research Institute. And then it turned into KPJYI, which is what the Krishna Patabi Joyce Ashtanga Institute, you know, Yoga Institute. So it changed from research to just being the institute. But there were only like 12 people in the room at that time. And so Patabi Joyce really got to know these students like really well. And that's, you know, for Todd, when he went over, and he was right, most people, because Ashtanga yoga, which is a huge difference from like vinyasa flow, you are getting your ass kicked physically. This is a hard physical, but it's meant to be because the body is the mind field, so it's meant to trigger the mind. You know, so that's why it's supposed to be this hard and this uncomfortable. So a lot of people will, and still to this day, now you can't go there as a beginner. Now you have to go with recommendations from other teachers because it's so busy. But he was one of the youngest there because most of these people had in their 30s and their 40s, he was in his early 20s, had spent years studying in their home countries before actually getting the nerve to come to anything. But I think ignorance is bliss sometimes, right? Like he didn't know. Yeah. Like, because he
what he was getting himself into.
Right. He didn't have this like expectation because he had not ever been in a Mysore situation before, in a Mysore room with a teacher. So he just went like innocent and green. And he tells this story. He likes to tell that because at this point, when he was first going, the Shala was at Patabi Joyce's house, in the back of his house, in a neighborhood called Lakshmipuram. Now it's in a neighborhood called Gokulam, and it's an actual institute. So you're actually going to his house to practice. And so you're in this neighborhood, and this guy came, I can't remember his name. Forgive me, I cannot remember his name. He was this big Asian teacher back in American Asian back in like the late 90s, and he had been on the cover of Yoga Journal. And so he came to India to study with Patabi Joyce, and he walked in and showed Patabi Joyce the cover of Yoga Journal with himself on it. Well, you don't do that. That's ego.
I was going to say, that probably doesn't do anything for him at all. He's just probably like, and
Todd said that Patabi Joyce broke this man. This man was literally staying in a house right beside the Joyces. And he said this man would be so sore that he would hobble out to a rickshaw. And I was like, they didn't even turn the rickshaw on. They just scooted it because it was like the next house over because he would be so sore. And so there's funny stories like that where you have. And I think that's one of the biggest difference too. A lot of times in these contemporary yoga classes, these vinyasa flow classes, you have this sense of like relaxation, which is not found in the yoga suit. That's not anywhere. I don't know where that comes from. That's not from where these teachers like will lower the lights and speak softly. And when you go to India, they're yelling at you.
Nice music.
Yeah, no, there's no music playing in India. They're yelling at you and telling you, you do, leg up here, next one, you know, and so it's a different situation for your nervous system. And even in Iyengar yoga, they beat you with a stick. Like they whack you with a stick if you're not in a right alignment. So it's not just Ashtanga, the lineage of Ashtanga that's different from Vinyasa flow. It's also these other lineages too. There's a strictness, very militant, as you say, you know, and that is because the teachers are doing that to keep your ego at bay and to also bring stuff like you brought in the first interview with him. You brought up soreness. Like, what do you do when you're so sore? He's like, you just keep going. That's what brings your stuff up. When you're that sore and you're that fragile and you're that irritated because you're sore, your stuff's going to come up easier.
That's true.
So there's a method to this madness, you know, and there is a fine line between being strict and being abusive. You know, and, you know, that's not what Sharat does. It's not what Pattabhi Jois was doing. They were not, you know, they would have, if things were too far, they would have pulled back, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a story Todd tells about between his first and second trip, Upavishta Konasana, which is a wide-legged straddle stretch, right? Your legs are, I do it a lot at the end of our fusion videos to stretch out your inner thighs. And Upavishta Konasana is a posture in the primary series. And in between his first and second trip, he was back home and he decided to go to like a class that he thought would help him with his practice in between. He would have been better off just practicing by himself at that point. But the teacher gave him a really bad adjustment and he hurt his hip in this wide-legged straddle stretch. So when he went back, I'm shocked he didn't tell the story. When he went back his second trip, he walked in and Guruji all saw it and was like, and Todd was like, yes, injured. And he said, oh, you know, Guruji said, oh, fixing. And he said, anytime you heard him say fixing, it was like, oh shit. Because you were about to get you were about to get what they called a yoga surgery. And the Joyces, they're also astrologists. And what Todd said with Pattabhi Jois, who they called Guruji, that was a pet name, Guruji. So if you hear people say that's kind of his pet name, his students called him. He could look at you and know all your astrology just by looking at you, just by looking at your energetic responses in your body. And so that also informed the way he taught people. So not just the doshas, but he would do certain things with certain people on certain days because he could see where literally the planets had aligned. And so Todd said, like every day, you know, Pattabhi Jois would like move his body and kind of feel around when he got to Upavishta Konasana just to see what was going on. And then Todd said one day that the planets must have aligned because he was in the posture and Pattabhi Jois was only like 5'2". He's very short. So he climbed on Todd's back, chest to his back, and he says, you go, and pushed his chest all the way to the floor. His hip made this loud popping sound. And Todd said he busted up and Guruji rolled off of him and started laughing. And he'd say, oh, bad man, laughing, like, because he popped him off. And everybody said it was so loud that everybody kind of turned around and looked. And Todd finished his practice. And he said, as he was leaving, Guruji goes, tomorrow you come, because he knew that Todd was going to wake up in pain. Like, make sure you come tomorrow. So sure enough, the next morning, he said he woke up and his hip was in extreme pain. But he came. And Pattabhi Jois had him do like 2 sun salutations. And they said, okay, go take rest now. Just to get the blood to flow into the hip. Well, over time, that hip healed perfectly. He has, at 52, it's been like 30 years, he hasn't had any problems with that hip at all.
Really?
Yeah,
because most people would start to develop arthritis there by now.
Yeah, no. And so he was like, there was a shamanistic element to these old gurus where they were able to almost break you, knowing that it was healing you, that something was getting pushed out.
Yeah.
And
I just think that's so amazing. And just to think of the knowledge that would have been passed down from through that family.
Yeah.
I just think it's absolutely incredible. And I understand now why you can't just do a 200-hour yoga course and just think that you know how to do this, on how to adjust people and how to read people and how to, you know when they can be pushed and know where they can't be pushed. Like, it makes so much sense now understanding this. It's just that would take years of practice and working with people and getting to know I mean, it's even like with healing work, you know, healing work as well. It takes years of working with people and being able to read their energy
Yeah.
and being able to tune in to understand what different people need and you know, how far to go with certain things, because yeah, it's all just experience is, yeah, it's very powerful, I believe.
Yeah. It's so,
Yeah.
and so you're right, it's so much more. And that's the thing. I think some people see people come into their, yoga studios or shalas, and maybe were an athlete. And so your body, your eye-hand coordination, just the stuff you think about with sports, that's also in yoga as well. And you see somebody who might be pretty athletic and you want to push them further, but a good teacher is going to be able to read their energy and their mental state and know
Yeah.
that even if they can do these postures, there's something going on that we need to pull back on. And
Yeah.
we need to not push too far because, or sometimes people who are super athletic have learned, and he talked about this, and I thought it was great, have learned how to skim the practice, how to avoid, dance around the areas that are hard for you, and that happens a lot. I'm glad he spoke on that because, like with the primary series, because we have 6 series in Ashtanga Yoga, so people, you're doing the same practice every day for many years before more stuff is added or taken away. And people always ask, well, isn't that boring? It's like the same practice. And it's like, no, because every day is different. And the more you drop in, it's like when people go to these yoga classes and they're doing a lot of different postures every day, they're not actually dropping into the postures. How can you if you're just doing it one time? You're just
Yeah.
skimming the surface. It's like if you decide to eat healthy for one day,
Yeah.
but in the rest of your life, you're eating McDonald's. Like that one day's done nothing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm.
eating healthy every day. So when you're
Yeah.
doing the same posture, so if you do primary series alone for 10 years, it's going to give you the ability to really drop into the work
Mm-hmm.
physically, mentally, emotionally, and you will all of a sudden, like postures that you loved in the beginning, a year from now you're going to hate, and vice versa, right? Because the body's going to change and the pattern, it's the weirdest thing. And because your patterning is changing. And so you're able to drop, and even in our stuff, Paula, I do that intentionally. So a lot of like the fusion classes, the walking classes, I'll do the same motions, maybe organized differently, so that people who are doing our videos are getting that
Yeah.
opportunity to drop into these movements.
And I've noticed that. And so it's actually really good, because then when I'm doing some different classes and I'm like, oh, I know that move, I know
Yeah.
how to do that one. And then it, builds up your confidence. And then when you're doing the new moves that you're not so familiar with, you're just like, okay, yeah, I'll get the hang of that. But it's good having those ones that you already know and you feel confident in. And yeah, it just kind of keeps things going and interesting, and you get better and better at it. Like I was saying to you the other day, like I've already noticed. So I've been probably doing it for a couple of 2.5 months or something now. I've been doing your workouts for, and already I'm noticing improvements.
Mm-hmm.
And areas where when I first did it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to have to do the modified version of this one. And then now I'm like, no, I don't have to do the modified version anymore. I can do this now.
Yeah.
And it feels so good. Like it really builds up your self-esteem when you can do that.
It's so true. We see that. I say that with Ashtanga with the beginner students, because in a Mysore setting, you're coming into an open practice room where everybody's doing their practice and the teacher's walking around helping everybody individually. Not like your own invented practice. You have to do what you've been assigned to do. But it's when you have a beginner, so you have a beginner walk in and they're just learning the sun salutations, whereas the person beside them is practicing third series, standing up with their leg behind their head. So you see very different variations of experience in the room. And beginners are always like, I'll never be able to do that. I'm like, don't be so sure on that. Like, because in a couple months later, they start to see the possibility is there, because the body is changing and the mind is changing. And with it's the same with bar. When I started doing like bar classes, like in the beginning, I only stayed because it was to support my Ashtanga practice. So I stayed a beginner for a long time, and I did just the real foundational bar stuff. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I actually thought, well, let me try some of these more these crazier ballet moves that are taught in bar from the more like experienced students, and being able to finally do that and feeling the connection. And I already knew that from the Ashtanga that it's going to take a while in the foundation. in order, if you want to, because you have to connect dots. Like your body has to connect in certain ways, not just mentally, emotionally, but also physically, in order to hold certain variations of shapes. And that's what, in dance you're holding shapes, in yoga you're holding shapes, and these shapes physically, from the physical perspective, will give you the nice toned stomach and the cute little toned butt and all that kind of stuff. But energetically, it's opening up paths of energy, these shapes are. And that's why we make shapes in yoga, is because it's opening up specific paths of energy in the body. And that's why I love the fusion bar work too, because it's the same thing. With the bar stuff though, the reason why I love putting it on our platform is because the skill is not as dangerous as like the Ashtanga. I don't want to scare people with Ashtanga, but there's always a chance of injury in anything. You can get injured walking down the street, right? But when you are trying to learn Ashtanga at home and you're trying to put your legs behind your head and you don't know if you're ready or not to put your legs behind your head, because let me give you a little hint too, guys. It's not really legs behind the head, really is not so much the hip as it is the core. Your core needs to be strong enough to support that. But so many people in their ego will try to do these advanced postures and end up hurting themselves and then blame the practice, when it's like, no, it wasn't the practice's fault. It was the fact that you weren't patient enough to build up.
Yeah, till you had the proper strength to do it.
Yeah,
kind of like with the handstands too.
To support you to do that, to help you, to help guide the body. When we teach children, when we teach students to put their legs behind their head, even if the hip is open enough and the core is strong enough, for a long time the teacher is standing behind you, guiding your leg to set that patterning, because a lot of people try to pull the leg up in front of them where it actually needs to be pulled to the side and around. And so the teacher will come for a long time and do it with you until you've set that pattern, so just instinctively to pull the hip around and back. And so there's so much intricate detail to that. And
sorry, can I just ask, with the sun salutations, are they quite safe to do by yourself at home?
Yeah. We're gonna do a like Ashtanga beginner series on the Academy. We're gonna go up to quarter primary series, which is a complete practice in itself. But it's the safe area, so that if you really like it, then we can help you find in your area. If you want to find an Ashtanga teacher or Mysore class, we can then help you do that. We have a student up in Montreal that I'm looking for right now for a teacher for him. Because for me as an Ashtanga teacher, my first and foremost in a Mysore room, whether that's online or in person, is my student safety. That I'm not going to hurt them, or they're not going to hurt themselves. Then the secondly is making sure we're getting the spiritual teaching. So first and foremost, you're watching out for people's safety. And so, to have a good teacher that understands how long this takes. And it's funny because I see a lot of the young teachers, and I was lucky because I'm considered a young teacher, where Todd is considered more senior, just because of the times we went to India. And but compared to Vinyasa Flow, I'm a very old teacher. But I was really lucky because my original teacher was David Garrigues, who was coming back to Atlanta in March, and he's an old. So Todd mentioned like authorization and certification in Ashtanga. And certification, because I know that the Yoga Alliance calls it certification too, but certification in Ashtanga, there are only 50 people in the world who are certified.
Wow.
That's how hard it is to be certified. Let's see, I think it's only 17 of those are women, so the majority are men, just because of the physical work it takes to be certified. 500 authorized of us were authorized. And then 50 certified. Wow. So, and David is one of those, my teacher, David. And so I had my experience in the beginning with David Garrigues was very similar to what Todd went through with Batabi Joyce. Very intense, I remember going to Philadelphia. One of my favorite stories where I really learned a lot. David's Shala in Philadelphia is in the historic district. And so these very old buildings, it's like right by Liberty Bell. So and I love that. I love being around all that old stuff, but you have to walk up all these flights of steps to get up to his Shala. It's up on the third floor. And the stairwell's really narrow. Those old stairs are very narrow. And I have this memory of this one trip I was up, and it was so cold because it snows up there, and I was bundled up because I'd walked, and I looked like Ralphie from A Christmas Story. My arms like what? Because I was so here's this Georgia girl like trying to. I can't even believe people are functioning in the snow. Like, shouldn't you be closed down? And I remember standing at the bottom of the stairs, and I'd been there for a while, and I was so unbelievably sore that I wanted to cry. In standing at the bottom of the stairs, not really sure how I was going to get up the stairs to the shala. I was that sore. And we're just hobbling up the stairs, taking everything off, going into the Mysore room, just thinking, this is going to suck. Like, this is going to suck. That ended up being one of my best practices that I've ever had. Wow. Once my blood started pumping, well, once you get your blood going, you're not as sore anymore because the body starts to, the vitality comes back. But I think it's because I walked in not having any expectation.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I've noticed that too.
Yeah.
When you have certain expectations with, certain stretches and things like that, then you just kind of think, oh yeah, I can do this. And then you get really disappointed because you can't. And then when you have no expectations, you surprise yourself, and it's amazing.
Freedom. What is it Janis Joplin said? Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Like, you're free at that point when you literally are so raw that you just have no the ego is just not there because you are so raw at that moment. And David, the thing about David is, even though he was such a hard teacher, I mean, I give a lot of credit to him for things that I know because he was such an incredible teacher, but I was never hurt with him. I was never injured. I was never like nothing. It was very controlled in the sense that he wasn't doing things just for shits and giggles. What he was doing was building me, was helping, was breaking me down. We have this Guruji say, oh, new body is making, new body is making. And Todd always laughs that what he neglected to say was old body has to break first. He just left that part out. And so, yeah, you're breaking down to rebuild. And you're breaking your body down, your mind down. The body is the mind field. So change, if the mind is having a hard time changing, then you change the body first, and then the mind will follow, and vice versa, to rebuild yourself. And those dark night of the soul and that's what they do in the military too, right? And, the spirituality, the dark night of the soul does come where you start to get real raw with your emotions, but that's an important part of it, to not try to ignore that part, that pain. Not just the physical pain, but the emotional pain, to let it come, because that's part of the process of the purging and spirituality, because it's you facing your own mortality. And, Paula, I will say too, like, I always say Todd's definitely my better half, because he's way kinder than I am, and he's way more patient than I am as a person. And oh God, yes. I am quick to be like, I can't stand that person. And he's always like, well, I can see their perspective. Like, he's very pensive when it comes to
I always thought you've always come across as very kind.
Oh, thank you. He's way kinder than me, though. Like,
I can see that though with him. Yeah,
very patient. His moon is in Virgo, so he's very grounded. My moon is in Scorpio, so I cry a lot. But even the smear campaigns that he's been through, watching him talk about that with you, I got emotional too, because what he's been through hasn't been fair at all. And I wanted to get your perspective on that too. Like, he talked about how all these teachers in Atlanta, when he moved to Atlanta, basically they were intimidated by him because he was this traditional yoga teacher. So different. His classes were so different from theirs. And they're tough. And Ashtanga teachers do have this kind of, they call Ashtanga the punk rock or the heavy metal of yoga. And a lot of Mysore teachers do have a reputation. They are kind of looked up to because they're cool. They're usually covered in tattoos. He's covered in tattoos. They're very smart people. They teach this badass yoga and they have badass practices. But with Todd is not the type of person that shows off. Like, he's very much keeps to himself. Like, he comes in, he does his stuff, and then he leaves. And what he's been through in this city from these 200-hour trained vinyasa flow teachers has been diabolical, like absolutely diabolical. And what was I mean, of course, I know all the story. When I was editing it, I know the full story of what he was talking about. Well, what was your impression of that as somebody, you know, because this is supposed to be the yoga world, right? This is supposed to be the world of healing and acceptance and liberation. What was your impression, Paula, of hearing someone like him talk about his experiences here with that?
Well, for starters, my heart's just broken for him because he just seems like such a sweetheart, and he just seems like he just is the kind of teacher that, you know, he would just give so much to his students, and then there's just those people that just come in and just take and take and take. And yeah, I think my heart is very sad for him for what he's gone through. Part of me was really shocked, and then another part of me is just kind of like, man, it's just like another freaking religion, isn't it?
Yep.
I really struggle with religion a lot. It's I guess maybe it's a trigger for me.
Yeah.
It's probably something I need to do a bit more healing work on. I just can't stand it. I can't stand religion. And I've said to you before.
He's the same way. He can't stand religion either. He's the same.
Yeah. I mean, I've said to you, I've said, like, I'm so proud of these amazing people that have got these big channels and they're getting out there and they're helping to wake people up. But I am baffled by the fact that they're all becoming religious. Yeah. And a lot of them are becoming Catholic. And I'm like, why?
That's the tippy top of the issue is religion. And I think Paula, what it is, I think it's ego.
Any other religion to that?
Well, I mean, I had somebody, I did a video over JD Vance, and I said, you know, people say he's super fundamentalist, but how fundamentalist can you be if you've married a Hindu? His wife is Hindu. And somebody even commented, oh, that's brilliant, because he can introduce her to Jesus. And I responded, I was like, this is the most narcissistic narcissism. Like, how dare you think that you're right and that you have to save people?
Exactly. Because just because you might believe in the Jesus that you believe in does not mean that that's the only right way to be. Like,
and how dare you?
It's very triggering for me. And I think, like, I was shocked to hear that about
the yoga
world, and to hear how people treat each other, especially when it came to lockdown and what followed.
I mean, we literally made it through lockdown, like he said, up by the skin of his teeth. And people tried to shut us down because we didn't shut down. He didn't. Yeah. And people tried to get us shut down. And that's the thing, like, yoga is all about holistic living. And so the fact that this was coming from the yoga world,
you would just expect them to be the most open-minded of all about it.
And you know, and actually lockdown taught me a lot, because there is, especially in traditional yoga, you do have this, like, with parampara or it's said both ways. He says it parampara, I say it parampara. It's said both ways, which he talks about in the episode, guys. And we do have a section on that on the Academy of Spirituality. If you're confused on that, you can check that out. But with that system, you are supposed to have respect for those who've come before you. So, like, teachers who are senior to me, like Todd will always be senior to me. But then there are teachers that I'm senior to. You know, so you have respect for the kind of the chain, how it works. And, you know, I would still respect somebody who's been practicing longer than me. I would respect their opinion, and I would probably go to seek their mentorship. But during lockdown, I realized that there are a lot of senior teachers that I no longer can learn from, because yoga is about liberation. It's about seeing the truth through the illusion. So seeing your own truth through your own illusion. And if you spent all these years working on that with yourself, then seeing the truth in the outside world should be very easy. Mm-hmm. And what happened was so obvious. Now, I'll be very careful how we say this, but what happened was so obvious. And these yoga people who have dubbed themselves, they've dubbed this, no one's given them that title of being the leaders of Ashtanga. They've given themselves that title, are falling for it. And so what have you been doing all these years? I'm looking at you, Kino McGregor. I made a whole video about this. I'll link it below, called Yoga and Crimes Against Humanity, because that's what it was. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at you, Kino. You've dubbed yourself as a leader in the Ashtanga world, but obviously, You haven't been practicing yoga all these years because you fell for the hoax. So what have you been doing all these years on your mat? Gymnastics? Have you not like taken it in? And that's that whole saying, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You can teach all of this to somebody, but you can't force them to integrate it into them, you know? And that's why, you know, for someone like Kino, she's hyper flexible, hyper mobile. So, and I've heard from other people that she just did not feel the practice the way some of us do. And David Garrigues used to say all the time, and I always tell my students this, if you struggle in primary series, you're one of the lucky ones because your karma came up early.
Yeah.
You don't beat yourself up because you're struggling in the primary series. You're one of the lucky ones because your karma came up early. Whenever I would be up at David's Shala, or I would be like watching or assisting, or you know, when a young girl, like in her early 20s, who was fit and used to be a cheerleader dancer came in, he was like, okay, whatever, teach them. But when like a 60-year-old man would come in who was like 50 pounds overweight and super stiff, David would get so excited because now we have something to work with. Now we have something to work with. And so I look at people like Kino, I'm like, do you just have nothing to work with? And so therefore nothing has worked?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, so just to share with you, I had a reading with Tamara in 2023, I think it was about midway through the year. And she said, I remember saying on my chart in a Melbourne accent, I just love it. She's so adorable. In WA, we sound quite different. And she's just saying, your first 12 to 14 years, like, she's like, I don't like it. I don't like it. She's like, it's not good. And basically she said my first 12 to 14 years on my chart, I was basically repaying karma for a different life.
Yeah.
And it kind of explains what I went through with my mom and just my childhood, I guess. Look, it wasn't really, I know there are plenty of people out there that have had really traumatic childhoods. Mine was probably a piece of cake compared to some people, but I guess in other ways it was quite challenging. But I kind of feel like, in a way, I'm kind of lucky that that happened to me, because I feel like, well, that's like me struggling in the primary series in the first lot, rather than, and I really think that has helped to make me who I am today, because life wasn't easy for me. I didn't have loving parents that were supportive and gave me everything I needed and were unconditionally loving, and it was not a breeze at all. I had to pretty much take care of myself a lot of the time. But man, I learned so much. You know, and I became strong because of it. Yeah.
And that's it. That's why karma is so multifaceted. Like, it's not, you know, we always think in the West of karma as being like a bad thing or something, but no, it's multifaceted, and it's always there for the highest good, always, you know, for lessons to be learned, you know, even Ram Dass talks about it, and Guruji used to talk about this too, especially for white people like Todd and myself who ended up in India. Like, obviously you've done this before or you wouldn't be here, you know, and Ram Dass talked about that. Like, someone was like, oh, his teacher, like, oh, you didn't finish, and so you had to come back. And someone could see that was maybe bad karma, but Ram Dass was like, well, great, I get to be here and do this again. Like, how amazing is that? So it's different. It's multifaceted. And it is, you know, for me with India too, like Todd just kind of had this knowing. I did as well. I think there's a lot of truth to that, because I kind of did as well. Like, once I decided, like, I'm going to do that, was kind of where my mind was set, was going to India. And it's not everybody, and Todd, you know, he when he said, like, not everybody has to go, because there are good teachers in your home country that can give you just as much of an experience. You don't have to go. If you want to go, every teacher will support you in going and write you a letter and help you achieve that. But, you know, and the fact that we can't make people teachers, you have to go to the source. That is, and I always tell people, always ask me, how do I know if a teacher is good or not? I'm like, look at their bio. Did they go through a training program, or do they have a literal teacher? Right? So if on their bio they just went through a training program, I would not, in my personal opinion, go to their class. You can't learn all of this in 200 hours. And I think with Vinyasa Flow, I think the thing that, because that's not an Indian, right? That's American vinyasa flow. That's not an Indian practice. It's not a yoga practice. I think what happens too, Paula, is that, and I've talked about this with the Esoteric Academy, when we're looking at asana, asana is posture, so the actual action of yoga. Different movements and different postures have either a pranic flow or an aponic flow. And the way classes are structured, like the primary series, you see a pranic, aponic, neutral posture. Pranic, aponic, neutral. So you're creating this pattern. So going to quarter primary series, when we do is that's Janu Sirsasana A, that's a neutral posture. So I'm ending you at a neutral posture. The students always need to be ended, their practice ends on a neutral posture. If you don't end a practice on a neutral posture, crazy making. Your energy's out of whack. So how many vinyasa flow teachers, no vinyasa flow teachers know this, by the way. They're not taught this. So they're choreographing these classes themselves where there's no responsibility, there's no knowledge of the recipe, of the ingredients that they're mixing. And so I think that's another reason why the vinyasa flow world has gone so wackadoo and so ego-driven, is because there's no intelligence in the design of these practices.
Yeah, because they just don't know that.
They don't know. It's like going into a pharmacy and taking a bunch of stuff that you don't even know what it is.
You don't even know what you're doing, what you're taking. Wow,
right?
That's big.
Yeah. And I think that's why, and then of course, like I personally believe, because I believe that the Yoga Alliance, which is the company that does these teacher trainings, totally corrupt, absolutely corrupt. People have written articles about them. Back in 2015, there was a huge boycott where people trying to boycott them, but they've dubbed themselves the be-all, the beholders of yoga.
Right.
And I can't do anything as an authorized teacher. I can't be involved with anything that the Yoga Alliance is involved with, or I will lose my authorization. That's how India sees this. It's very serious for them.
Wow.
It's a crime. What they've done is a crime. But you have these people, I think this goes to entitlement too, Paula, and where, Todd spoke a lot about trusting your own path. And he's really good about that. Like, everybody has their own path. You can't be jealous of somebody else when you also need to, if you're jealous of somebody else's path, and that shows you have no trust in your own, right?
Yeah.
And with, we're in this day and age where everybody is entitled. We can identify as whatever we want to identify as. We can be whatever we, but there's no follow through. Like back when I was a kid, like if you wanted to be a doctor, yeah, you could, but we were taught you have to go to medical school. You have to work really hard. You have to study.
Yes.
Well, it's the same with yoga. Not everybody is meant to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so many people, their ego in the vinyasa flow world gets so out of hand that they want that power, but they're not willing to actually do the work to be given that power. And if they actually go to India and do the proper work, by the time they're handed that power, they've been so fucking humbled by their own experience that they're not going to, well, I mean, it happens sometimes, but we're not.
I mean, look, it's exactly the same in the healing world too. There are so many courses. Like, I was horrified because I was looking up. I mean, I've done a few courses online. I'm not going to lie, because I just like to continuously learn. My kind of problem is I tend to start them and don't always finish them, so I don't always have certificates for them. But I more just like to learn about them just to kind of add to my knowledge base. But I remember seeing on this one website I was looking at, and they had Dolores Cannon's course for like $60 or something. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, no, like you can't, this is her own unique, she came up with this herself. Like, I mean, I've only done her level 1. And I mean, I unfortunately, I didn't get to train with her personally. I had a session with a lady who did get to train with her before she passed away. I didn't discover it until after she passed away. But when you go through her daughter's website, because she's taken over now, they're giving you videos of how Dolores teaches you how to do it, how to do it properly. And she even recommends that people should not be doing it online, because she says when you're taking someone through a past life regression, it can be really traumatic. A lot of things can come up. I mean, obviously you've got to speak to the subconscious mind so that they're not experiencing, not reliving the trauma. But the thing is, she said, you've got to keep your eyes open. You've got to be watching them. She said, don't put an eye mask over them, because if you put an eye mask over them to help them relax, you can't see what's going on with their eye movement, what they're going through. She said, sometimes people are going through traumatic stuff and you need to safely take them out of that and say, just remind them, you don't have to relive this. You can just view this from an objective point of view, etc., etc. Anyways, the point that I'm trying to get across is just like what you're saying with the yoga teaching, is that there are so many little nuggets of gold that you can only get from somebody who has lived and breathed this. Same with, you know, like Dolores Cannon, for example, she lived and breathed this.
Yeah.
So she's sharing her knowledge and she's training people how to do it properly. But if you just go sign online and do some quantum healing course that somebody has just adapted from her work, they've missed all of that gold. And it's the same as with Kerry, like Kerry designed her whole course. She's created all of her healing techniques herself. So when you go and actually, I mean, she is offering it online now, which is so exciting, because I said to her, Kerry, your teachings are just incredible. I said, you've got to reach more people. So incredibly, so she's offering it online now, but she's offering, I believe she's going to be doing it just as a recording of an actual class. And that's kind of like what Dolores Cannon offers too. It's a recording of her doing an actual class. So you're getting all those little nuggets of gold from the people that have actually created it, you know, not just some quick.
That's Parampara. That's the Parampara. That's the source. Yeah. No, that's so important. I think too, like, the more that you integrate into your lineage, the more you can kind of do stuff online, because you have the grounding, the foundation, you know what to look for. But to begin with,
true.
And that's why I was said on our academy, like how I've designed these classes, that's why I've kept them pretty simple too, is because I can teach you the foundation of what I've learned through traditional yoga without having to crack your leg behind your head.
Yeah.
So it's a safer, you know, that's it's a safer, there's so many reasons why I'm doing, you know, and that's something you kind of have to trust. I mean, not to sound culty, but when you have a teacher that's like been doing this for so long, there's an inherent trust that that teacher knows what they're doing, even if it doesn't make sense to you. Todd was telling me, a student he has now who's a big Vinyasa flow teacher, our downward facing dogs in traditional yoga are done very different than what you see in Vinyasa flow. They look different. And there's a reason for it. And this is another, the arms and legs are closer together. We bring our hand, we open our shoulder blades. So the Akam position is the same, where the arms are coming forward. We're dropping our chin way in, looking towards our navel. There's a reason why downward dog is done that way in Ashtanga yoga. And in Vinyasa flow, it's very sloppy. You know, first of all, downward facing dog is a variation of a handstand, right? It's so you have to be active in it. Well, in Ashtanga yoga, we have these things, these jump backs and jump throughs that you're going to be doing in the primary series when you get to the seated series, and they're very complicated, and they're a lot of strength. And Todd was telling me he got this new student in Vinyasa flow, and sometimes they're the hardest students because they think they know everything, and then you have to break it down and reteach them. And he kept trying to correct her sun salutations with down dog, and she was kind of pushing back. And finally, he just left it. Finally, yesterday, he got her to the point where she was doing the jump backs and jump through, and she asked, she was like, I feel like my arms are too short, which we get that all the time. You're not too short. And I can't get my legs back. And Todd goes, well, that's why I was having you do, that's why, think about tucking your belly in, pushing the floor. And it also dawned on her that is why downward facing dog is done that way in Ashtanga. He said the look on her face when it all clicked.
Yeah, right.
And he said her attitude toward him changed in that moment. All of a sudden she respected him. She started doing, because all of a sudden she realized that he was being hard on her and this thing she thought she knew from Vinyasa flow, but he was going and correcting it because he needed to.
Yeah.
Right. And those little intricacies, you're right. Like if you were just to do, you know, a yoga video, you wouldn't know that unless you had a teacher there molding you to actually have those dots connect with how the body responds to the action, and the action then responds to the thoughts in the head. And I just, you know, I will say I I know the next episode that Todd does with you, I actually want to do, I was telling you we should do one together because he did leave. There was a lot he left of his story. I mean, I think he should even talk about all his tattoos too, because that took a huge yoga. I mean, he is
Oh.
covered in tattoos. I don't know if you guys can see it. He is like covered. I told him don't do your neck or your face, but he is covered otherwise in tattoos, like sleeves. And just to
Wow.
be able to sit through that and to breathe through that. And but I know the next episode we're going to do the law of one because
Yeah, which
he,
I'm very excited about.
me too. He's the one that introduced me to the law of one. And therefore, I told him the other day, I was like, you realize that I mean, I get emails all the time from people thanking me for introducing them to the law of one. And
Oh,
I was like, you realize, Todd, that you're the reason why thousands of people literally have found this material, this very obscure material. And I was like, and how much is that pissing the dark side off? Because the law of
yeah.
one, even with the controlled opposition, even with the truther community where there's, I even see people saying like JD Vance has a mask on and he's really JFK. And I just roll my eyes. I'm like, that's treason, y'all. Like
Nice.
these truthers, I'm like, can you see me?
You're frozen, completely
Oh, there we
frozen.
go.
Oh, well, there you
Okay.
go. You come back. I was just
Oh,
like,
they don't want us talking about this, do they? This is how powerful I want is. Yeah, I'm seeing all these people. Oh, JD Vance really has a well, that's a coup. That's a coup. The American people did not. They voted for Trump and Vance, not for Kennedy. Not saying he wouldn't be a good VP, but that's a coup and that's treason. So no, there's no mask. And if there is, we're in trouble because that's the exact same thing that the Democrats did too with Biden and Kamala, where that's a coup. What's good for the goose is also good for the gander. We can't be hypocrites. But I think a lot of people who were getting caught on that delusional truther train, when they started to read the law of one, it brought them back down to the reality of what's really happening. And that's because of Todd. And that's because of him that he I think by him telling me and then me telling you guys, it saved a bunch of people from getting caught in the getting sucked into the service to self, the dark side, which most of the truther community is part of the dark side, is part of the controlled opposition. It is part of the
I mean, how smart is to do that? They know that people are going to wake up, so why not infiltrate that
I know. I had
thing?
someone leave a comment about, well, this person did a breakdown on Vance and therefore he's bad. My response was, did you double check that person's research? Because if you didn't, then you're no different than the people watching CNN.
Yeah, and you don't know if that person's done an accurate analysis. I mean,
you're putting your faith in somebody else telling you the truth, but have you not learned anything from the media? Like you have, and in my videos, I'm always telling people to check my research. Like, don't take I don't want to be the ambassador of truth. Like that's a lot of responsibility. I don't want that title, but
that's too much pressure.
I know, right? But Todd's the reason why that you guys have all learned the law of one, and it saved you. And so I think it would be really important. And his connection to the Cassiopeians, and turns out Laurinaites is like, there's just so many weird synchronicities there, and I cannot wait for him. I think you guys will really love that interview too, because he knows so much about the law. He's been studying the law of one and how that's affected himself and his yoga practice, and and the way he sees the world, and so I cannot wait. But you guys, so is there anything you want to conclude before we show the preview of the second interview with Todd?
I just feel also really admired how he continued to learn. Like he didn't just stop with Ashtanga yoga and be like, "Yep, this is it. I'm done now." He continued to try different things and continued to learn different things and did meditation courses and learned the Vedic chanting and everything. And so, yeah, I'm just so excited to do the next interview with him and learn more. It's just so exciting. He's got such a fascinating life and a very humble perspective. He's just so easy to talk to and so lovely, and there's no ego there, and it's so nice. He's so approachable. And
well, that's a testament too. I told you, Paula, he's very introverted. He's an incredible teacher in the Meister room, but otherwise he's super introverted. So the fact that he's comfortable doing an interview with you really speaks highly of you too, that he feels comfortable doing that. And I just, you guys, please make sure one more thing I want to acknowledge. He didn't say this. He talks about respecting all of your teachers. Like that's put on, but like regardless of whether you disagree with him now or not. His Vedic chanting teacher, Mother Maya, that he speaks about, right before the election, she sent a big email out supporting Kamala. And it really upset him. And he realized that, and I will be honest with you, I don't know this woman. I've never met this woman, but every time he talks about her, I got a really bad feeling in my stomach. Ooh. He learned a lot from her, but the fact that he's still able, and he thought about emailing her being like, what the fuck, you know, but he didn't. He just left it. He was like, well, now I know what I need to know. Like that path is now closed. Yeah. I learned what I need to learn. Now I can move on. But the fact that even after that happened, he can still respect her enough for what she taught him in the moment speaks highly of his integrity. Because that really, when that happened and he got that email, like I immediately called Tamara. Like I was like, you're not going to believe this. Like he was really shook up over that when he got that email from her telling him to go vote for Harris. Like that really, like, as yoga teachers, you guys, I know like I speak about stuff like this on my channel, but my channels, most of my students don't even know I have a YouTube channel because I don't really talk about it in the yoga room. As a yoga teacher, I'm never going to talk about that with my students ever. Neither is he. Like that's not my place to tell you what to do or to tell you.
So that's very, I can't believe that she's emailing people telling them how to vote. Like that's not her business.
She's not even American. She's not even American. She's Indian. Wow. But I would, and I want to clear that up too. The fact that he was able to bring her up and just be respectful. But I want to say that too. Like you guys, yoga teachers are not. That is, in my opinion, unethical.
Well, that's overstepping the line.
Yeah. I have my views, obviously, and I'm very strong in those views. But I'm never gonna like turn a student away from having a different opinion. I'm never going to even talk to them about that. I'm never going to tell them what or who to vote for because that's none of my business.
No, absolutely not.
That's not, I might disagree with them, but that doesn't mean I still don't love them as students and as people. That's not my place. You know, we can't interrupt people's karma, right? And so I wanted to give him a shout out for that too, because he meant what he said when he said you're supposed to respect your teachers, because he did that and he didn't even bring that up, that had happened. So anyway, but guys, so hold tight. We're going to show you a 20-minute preview of this interview with Todd. The Esoteric Academy, all that information is down in the description box below up until February 20th, you guys. We are still running our special where tuition is $25 a month for the soft launch. We're going to do the big launch, the grand launch. The 20th of February, which the tuition will go up to $40 a month then. But if you purchase now, you're going to be locked in at $25 a month for forever. Like that's our thank you to you. Oh, and Paula, we have our first live call.
Yeah, we do, which will be exciting.
We're going to be doing this monthly.
Yes, February the 1st.
Yeah, 7 a.m. Eastern time. I know that's early for us here, but we're going to change the times each month to try to accommodate people all over, because we have people from all over the world, especially in Australia. And so, you know, for 7 a.m. for me is 8 p.m. for Paula. I know we have people in Central Time, that's 6 a.m. So I hope you can make it. We're going to post it up. We'll send you all the link to join this. The first live call is just going to be a meet and greet for us to kind of meet each other. And then as time goes on, we'll think of different themes to talk about in our live calls. And of course, you can always ask questions, but you can email us questions anytime, guys, if you have a question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got a community center and people, anytime they have a question or a query, they can just send it through. And then there's also private emailing through the community as well. So if you don't want everybody to read your little post, then you just send it privately to us. So
yeah, we want to help you as much as we can from being distance. We want to, and if that means, honestly, if that means us helping you is helping you find a Mysore teacher in your area, then you know, we'll help you with that too. You know, that we're serious about this. This is integrity. And so, yeah, you guys, I know you're about to meet with Catherine, because I think she's going to put some first stuff up as well. So that'll be exciting, you guys. So hold tight for Todd's, a preview of Todd's interview, guys. And again, everything is down. All the information is down in the description box below for the Esoteric Academy. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yoga was still, you know, obscure back then. Yeah, it hadn't become as popular. And so I decided I was going to travel to Sri Lanka and stay for a bit and then come back. And then and then I ended up moving to San Diego. It was a while until I went back to India. It was many years until I went back. Yeah. And so I left with that permission, but didn't know if I was ever going to use that permission. And so then thing, and that's because people were taking advantage of Pattabhi Jois in a way. They would go to Mysore and they would study for a month, and then they would put it on their bio, study with Pattabhi Jois, and it was like, well, there's a big difference there, studying with Pattabhi Jois for 1 month versus, years. Yeah. And becoming close to him, and he gets to know you and all that stuff, and he gives you permission. And so they wanted, and as Ashtanga got popular, more and more people were trying to do that. To bolster their reputation. And so that's why they ended up doing the authorization thing in the southeastern United, because I knew I was going to move back to the southeastern United States, and I was asking him, who's over there I can go study with? And he goes, oh no, there's no one. You should go. You need to go teach. You need to help spread Ashtanga. And so that's what first planted the seed. So I decided to try to see if I can get things to work in Atlanta. And then I think it was 2006, I ended up moving to Atlanta. It did, there were some issues with Atlanta. Ashtanga at that time, after, I'd say starting in like the early 2000s, Ashtanga started to catch on. People wanted to experience that the word had gotten out, that it was a really intense form of yoga, and it had a lot of integrity, and Pattabhi Jois's reputation got out there. So Ashtanga started to grow organically, but it was growing by people who really didn't understand the practice. So, there were unqualified teachers teaching Ashtanga and starting their own little programs, and none of them were teaching Mysore classes, which is really the heart of learning Ashtanga yoga, is Mysore classes. And so they were mostly just teaching it like sort of a vinyasa flow. And so when I never would have imagined how difficult it would be for me to sort of break into that, because I really shook things up when I came to Atlanta, and because these students really weren't used to being taught, just because you're going through the movements and there's a teacher in front of the room, teaching, just calling out the postures without any hands-on assistance, the practice is really in-depth, and it takes one-on-one teaching to really understand it, and in their mind, they think that they know what they're doing. But then when you get that student into Mysore class, when you can really work with them one-on-one, the realization comes pretty quickly that there's so much room for improvement. And that's when I started to get all the pushback. So I'm starting to teach Mysore classes. At first, they're super busy right off the bat, because everyone's curious, like, who is this guy? A student of Pattabhi Jois. What is this Mysore class? They had never heard of what a Mysore class was, or they had a misconception that Mysore class was a class where the teacher just practiced with the students and you just did your own thing. And so, I walked into this situation where, the word had gotten out about Ashtanga, but the deeper truth of the practice really weren't there. Because a lot of people couldn't take actually being taught. It's one thing to sort of skim the surface, and you learn how to creatively maybe swerve around your limitations. In like a lead class where you're not being taught, and then with a good teacher helping to sort of aim a student in their trouble spots, and then going in and helping them, like, get in deeper to that and resolve some issues, and doing that step by step, and within that you would have to take someone that maybe is doing the whole first series and cut 2/3 of their practice back and say, no, you should only be practicing to this point. Once you get this area worked out, it's going to make way for, you to move a little further forward, and then a little further forward, and not trying to take the whole thing. And a lot of people really couldn't grasp the usefulness of that. Then other challenges arose because other people, other teachers, yoga teachers, mostly my students, wanted to hold their own Mysore classes. And I'm okay with that. But the way that they would go about it got to be a huge challenge. And Bryce maybe can edit some of this stuff out, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to bring it up, because she was like, oh, you should bring up the challenges that we went through and that I went through as well before Bryce came into my life, of teachers that were threatened by me, that wanted to do what I taught them how to do, and that instead of going out on their own and just trusting that things will work out for themselves, they needed to create smear campaigns with me. And that got to be really, really hard, especially once Bryce and I got together. There was so many huge smear campaigns, so many lies being told. And so that was another huge challenge. And that went on for years. Yeah. You know, and I sort of understand, like, it would be not understand why people would do crooked things behind the scenes to undermine someone, but understand how someone might be threatened by someone with experience like me. You know, because I went
a genuine person.
Exactly.
You're just a genuine person who's experienced and learned something unique, and you just want to share that. And I just don't understand why people are so threatened by that.
Right. And others didn't do that. They could have done that, but they didn't choose that. I chose that. And in the long run, for a while, I had to suffer for those choices because people were intimidated by that, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but I'm just trying to spread the teaching and do my thing. And other people, I guess, you know, looking at my experience, have to push up against their own inadequacies, you know, when I'm not subjecting them to that. I'm just doing my thing, you know, but they want what I have, you know, but also maybe, you know, people being a little jealous that their life path didn't lead them how it led mine, you know, adjust students and all that stuff. And I would just give. And at a certain point, they felt like they just wanted to take that and run with it and erase me in the process. And so part of the smear campaign came from these old students not wanting to acknowledge where they learned all that they know from, because I was in the same city. And though they didn't want to be my they didn't want to have to compete with me. And so instead of competing with me, what they can do is they could turn people against me and travel to India and go study with Punjabi Joyce, because this is a Padampada practice, you know? This is a practice based on traditional yoga, and traditional yoga is based on Padampada. And part of Padampada is acknowledging those that came before you, acknowledging all of your teachers, because that is showing faith in God directing you on the proper path. If all of a sudden you go, oh, well, my path was all good up until I practiced with me, you know, it's like, well, then, you know, that's the crazy thing. It's like these teachers will also talk about how important Padampada is, but at the same time, they will erase people off their timeline.
Right.
And that's not Padampada, because Padampada is also there to help us stay humble by acknowledging how we got to where we are. Just like I acknowledge all the teachers that came that I studied with. Exactly. And I trusted my path. There was no teacher in that line that I would be ashamed of practicing with, or I would want to erase, regardless of who they are. Yeah. And I acknowledge all those teachers that influenced me over all those years, you know, and I put out that, you know, in all honesty. But then I have others that, you know, would want to take from me and then erase me, or if they can't erase me, just smear me and give a good reason why they don't acknowledge me, other than just taking it inside and dealing with the petty tyrants. You know, Carlos Castaneda in his books, and I haven't read all the books, but there's a section that talks about as you traverse the path of spiritual understanding, there will be people put on your path to challenge you, and they're called petty tyrants. They're not going to kill you, but they're going to cause a whole lot of trouble for you, and that those are very important to have and experience. And you learn a lot about life dealing with those people. Yeah. And so for me, it's been a growing experience learning how to deal with that sort of stuff,
Absolutely.
and over time, I've just realized the best way to deal with it is to not deal with it correctly head on and to just keep moving down your path. And so I did that and I made it through. And then at the tail end of it all, I started to getting recognition by, people from around the world saying, like, oh my God, you gave me strength to push through. I so appreciate what you did. And I wasn't even vocal about it. People just heard, like, Tom's over here. He's not shutting down. He's not budging. While everyone else is going woke out there.
And so just to backtrack a little bit, so at what time did you meet Bryce? Because I'm sure all the listeners would like to know that story.
Bryce came along. We were introduced through one of my students. Yeah, and she was just getting back from India. Call us the power couple. Because we're both authorized to teach and have had a lot of yoga experience, and we teach well together, and.
And so, did you guys did you work together for a little bit, or
we started dating pretty soon after we met. Yeah. Because I wouldn't want her to become my student. Yeah.
Right. But then that's just a bit awkward. Yeah.
Never come up with that understanding from the very beginning. And then at the same time, I would go off every few months for 10-day or 2-week-long silent meditation retreats where I would sit for 12 hours a day. And and I thought for a long time, I thought that I got into yoga in a sense because I wanted to become enlightened. I wanted my Kundalini to rise, and I wanted to experience those things you would read about in books, of enlightened masters. I was thinking, with enough practice.
So many of us do.
Yeah, with enough practice and enough discipline, I can do this. And that's but there are definitely a lot of pitfalls to that. And I didn't realize until having practiced meditation so intensely for so long, and it creeps up on you. You're not really cognizant of what's happening to you with that much meditation, and you start to realize that there's a reason why they lock up monks in a monastery, and separate them from society. When you're going to go that deep in meditation and you're going to dedicate that much of your life in meditation, you come to a place where you really can't fully safely function in regular society. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so having some crazy realizations about where I was headed with it and what it was, parts of me that it was deadening, parts of me that it was waking up, but at the same time, parts of me that were becoming numb, that should have never become numb with that much meditation. Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe you could say it's like the way your significant other, not talking about Bryce, is a different significant other, but the way you could be treated by a significant other, and for those things to become acceptable because you're able to just let it sort of pass through you. You're able to sort of constantly wipe the slate when if it wasn't for meditation and the ability to let those things move through you, those things would hit you in a way where it would wake you up and say, this situation is wrong and I should exit this situation, or I should change the way this situation is unfolding in a way. And so, yeah, it's great to accept what's happening, and it's great to not let that stick to you emotionally. But at the same time, it allows things to happen to you that you would otherwise not accept.
But I think maybe could be a unique situation. I mean, I do think that, being present on Earth, being in the third dimension, we are supposed to be present, and we do need to stand up and say, no, that's not okay, and fight for our rights, basically.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's a tough one, isn't it, to know how far to forgive and accept things and to let them slide, and how much to say, okay, well, no, I'm in a toxic relationship, or your behavior is affecting me negatively. I'm going to, you know, put a stop to that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
It is. Yeah. I found this article, and I wish that I would have saved the article, and it was written by someone who was doing Vipassana meditation for many, many years, for, 30 years. And he had led retreats, and his whole life was involved with Vipassana meditation. And he had access to many people who had been doing Vipassana meditation for, hours a day, and doing, and 4 times a year going to these 10-day silent meditation retreats. And he started to interview people about their lives and about what this meditation had done for them, and all this, sitting and silence and everything had done for them. And he started to realize a pattern with all these people. And he started to realize how destructive these patterns were for these people's lives. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, I could totally see that happening here, And so, you can't be, it's not just like with eating healthy and clean. If you eat too much cleaner than the environment that which you live, it's constantly going to make your clean eating is constantly going to make you sick, because there's a certain amount of toxins that you have in your body given the environment that helps to buffer your system. And so if you were to live in the middle of a crazy city with pollution everywhere, and you were to be on a raw vegan diet, and your body's always in cleansing mode, you're constantly going to be sick every time you walk out the door, because there's no buffer there. You're too clean. Yeah. 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 And I know this from experience, because there was a time where I had done so much fasting and so much limited eating. I've been through all that. It was a huge trend back when I first started getting into yoga. I've delved as deep as you can go with that. I mean, I can't even tell you about all the crazy fasting I've done. And limiting certain things in my diet, and because I was willing to try anything to reach what people described as enlightenment, in a sense, but at the same time while trying to remain human, and still have a social life and friends and all of that.
Right.
And Bryce, at the time where I wasn't shutting down, everyone else was, her studio shut down. And that's when she started her channel, which is crazy to think about. I remember her sitting down the day after her Shala closed and just say, what, with 0 subscribers, she was like, what, I always wanted, I heard her talking about before COVID even hit, that she wanted to start a YouTube channel. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. You should do that. Anyway, the way in which she sat down and started that channel, and she has not stopped since that day that she created that account. Like literally, it was nuts. And how one thing led to the next, and she hasn't slowed down, It all started in India. You were talking about our relationship and stuff, and we were in India, and she didn't know anything about conspiracy theories. She really didn't. She wasn't into that at all. And I had been awake since what woke me up. And so I've been awake and studying this stuff for a long time. And it had come to a point, because we're getting more serious. We're in India together. I was like, okay, I'm going to drop this bomb now and see how it's going to take place.
And see how she takes it.
Our relationship isn't going to have a history if she can't get on a similar page, And not that I don't constantly talk about conspiracy theory. I'm so jaded. But
you need to know that they're open to it. I'm very much the same now. I'm like, I can't be in a relationship with someone who's not at least open to that kind of stuff, because once you know this stuff, you can't unknow it.
Right, totally, yeah. And so we were in India, and I decided, okay, I'm gonna hit her with this, and thought long and hard about how I wanted the first introduction to be. And I was thinking, she's so smart, and she's had so much schooling, and her, private schooling, went to one of the best schools in the nation, and I was like, I don't know if you know who Jordan Maxwell is, but Jordan Maxwell.
Yes.
Okay,
he did us
a whole series on the meaning of certain words that we just take for granted, and not really knowing the history of those words and how they play into law and politics and everything. And so sat her down and had her listen to that, and it was just, all it took was that little bump, and then it just went off.
And it just took off. Yeah.
Let me show you the sky below.